for another video. So this is going to be episode 3 in the Reddit DD archiving process / read alouds. Pardon me. Yeah, guys, just to briefly go over it again, I am not doing this for profit. I'm just a fellow ape who lurks the Reddit boards like I'm sure most of you guys do. So yeah, let's just get started. This is from the username Swede Child of Mine, and it was posted 19 hours ago. The title is Theory, All the Pieces, Part 1, The Anatomy of the Crime of Citadel, and is listed as a DD, due diligence. Behind every great fortune, there is a crime. This is a quote from Balzac, and I tend to agree with that. This post is the collective narrative behind the plays on GME by large institutions. This will be a multi-part DD post gathered from excellent insights on this sub, as there have been no open confessions of these activities by the perpetrators, a la Bernie Madoff, or books that have yet to be written. This will only exist as a theory, with pieces of evidence to support where we can. It is designed to be high level, approachable, supported by available sources when possible, and represent key players and interests as it relates to the events surrounding Gamestop. It is incomplete. Where information cannot be confirmed, it will be marked as rumor or speculation and should be treated as such, but it should not be a rabbit hole. It will be ongoing and require updating as well as contributions from you outlined below. So in the beginning he's just basically it's like a disclaimer. So part 1, the crime of Citadel. The current price of GameStop stock is artificial. In simpler terms, the price of GameStop is not determined by normal market dynamics, supply and demand. This is because Citadel and others have been illegally manufacturing fraudulent shares of GameStop, abusing their special designation as market maker to profit their firms. The more straightforward term for their activity is share counterfeiting. Citadel and others have been counterfeiting shares of GameStop, profiting from non-existent shares, dumping fraudulent stock to lower the price, and abusing system lapses to hide their activities. Their scheme that has grown wildly out of hand and now threatens to wipe out many more firms in the market due to their own risky behaviors. An overview of the mechanics of this scheme. FTD, or failure to deliver, a key term to understand. 1. FTD is a standardized term for delay in delivering a share that's been purchased. In the context of Citadel, an FTD represents a counterfeit share. In the U.S. market, a share can be sold regardless of whether or not it actually exists. The financial system accepts the transaction at face value so the buyer can continue trading. The delay in delivering a share is meant to be temporary. But for Citadel's case, they never had the share they sold. They abused their position to sell something they didn't have. Outright share counterfeiting is highly illegal and one of the financial crimes that carries prison sentences. For Citadel to perpetrate this crime, they needed to hide it among their transactions and appear legitimate. FTDs can be legitimate and enforcement is subjective. And then he links something there. Citadel's scheme, Part 1, create a share legitimately. 1. Citadel's activities are recognized as a bona fide market maker, an industry designation which allows them special authorities and responsibilities. One of their special authorities is to create shares in the marketplace as part of their role of providing liquidity. Parentheses. Liquidity is finance speak for keeping the shelves full with the stocks people want. End parentheses. Citadel is allowed to execute transactions without owning the share, i.e. market makers can temporarily create a share from nothing, with the understanding that it is illegal to manufacture shares for their own profit. This temporarily created share is recorded as a short, designed to be sold to the marketplace then bought back within a brief period of time to prevent an enduring non-existent share in the marketplace. Shorting is also a common practice of borrowing a share from someone else's account. The borrowed share is sold into the marketplace and ideally bought back at a lower price and returned to the account. Many financial companies do this legally, Citadel included. Both traditional shorting and bona fide market maker shortings creates a legitimate, non-existent share temporarily. Again, the non-existent share is meant to be a placeholder until a real share is delivered. If the share is out in the marketplace long enough without being repurchased, the share is flagged as an FTD, failure to deliver. Since there was no actual share delivered, if it is never reconciled, it becomes counterfeit. Citadel Scheme, Part 2. It's only illegal if you get caught. 1. The process of determining an FTD or failure to deliver is technically complex. There are regulations for the amount of days which need to pass before a share is declared an FTD. Additionally, after a share is declared an FTD, there are additional times allowed for counterfeit shares to be rebought, with even more time allotted for market makers to do so. But once the allotted time passes and the delivery is still failed, the party at fault is subject to enforcement measures. The enforcement measures are weak, small fines levied far after the violation, generally for less than the profit made from the activities. And it is difficult to track. Individual shares may trade dozens or hundreds of times per day, and there is no way to follow the path or origin of each individual share. So the counterfeit share is logged against the overall pool of shares, not knowing which particular one is non-existent. But the contracts for the sale remains on the books of the parties involved. And while enforcement agencies are not interested in small volumes of counterfeit shares or low-cost shares, Citadel has been manufacturing millions of fraudulent shares at a price of hundreds of dollars each, getting away with it under the guise of bona fide market maker activities that have yet to be settled. However, any company with a short position on their books will retain the debt of the counterfeit share for the duration it is on the market. Citadel Scheme, Part 3, Take the Money. Once the counterfeit share is sold and becomes an FTD, there are several options for addressing the FTD. Buying a share in the marketplace is the primary way of closing out an FTD. This also closes out the short position that is on the seller's books. A second way to close an FTD is when the price of the stock goes to zero and the stock gets delisted. This voids all of that company's stock, including the fraudulent shares. The FTD problem simply goes away with all of the other stock. For a party engaged in the criminal act of counterfeiting shares, their main interest is in avoiding consequences of FTDs, not getting caught. They intend to sell shares they never have and never pay for them. Paying for shares from the marketplace is undesirable to Citadel, not only because it increases costs, the cost of legitimacy, but also because the price of shares could go up and make the transaction a loss. Flooding the market with shares also has the added effect of dropping the price of the stock, because the market is overwhelmed with supply. And if the price goes so low that the stock gets delisted, the debt of the shares on the seller's books becomes a write-off, which they actually enjoy a tax benefit from. So bankrupting companies is the most desirable outcome from share counterfeiters. The targeted company is an unfortunate casualty chosen for its ability to be shorted into bankruptcy. This is the first part of Citadel's scheme: target a company, flood the market with counterfeit shares, drop the price to the stock of zero, walk away with the profits from the counterfeit shares, and enjoy the tax write-off. Note, short positions are not publicly disclosed, and a company's bankruptcy closes all positions, so tracing these activities to Citadel is extremely difficult. These activities can happen entirely behind closed doors and leave little evidence to the public marketplace. That is what this sub has been working with: trace evidence of counterfeiting activities in the marketplace. Citadel Scheme, Part 4, and Run. Profitably closing an FTD, either via bankruptcy or repurchase, requires one thing: the price of the target stock to go down. In this case, the GameStop stock price went up during their scheme. This caused Citadel to find an alternative to closing the FTDs. So perhaps as a temporary stopgap, or perhaps as a last resort, Citadel chose to perpetuate FTDs without closing them. They would keep the FTDs ongoing as long as they could, never getting caught until circumstances let them exit their position, hiding until they escape. Since FTDs are reported by time, Citadel figured that they would reset the timer to avoid getting caught, very similar to floating credit card payments. They could do this two ways. First, they could short the traditional way, borrow or acquire a batch of shares from an exchange or dark pool, and then turn around and close their FTDs. These new shorts would later become new FTDs, but it would give them a few days. Second, they could counterfeit additional shares. While it is uncertain if it was possible for Citadel to use counterfeit shares to close out FTDs, they're releasing more and more counterfeited shares into the marketplace. Let them easily borrow or buy the shares back, then turn around and close out the FTDs. Again, shorting gives a few more days until the counterfeit shares become FTDs. Citadel could reset FTDs like this continuously, never running into the enforcement limits without being able to reset the FTD timer again. This would also keep the marketplace full of shares, normally a desirable outcome. But in the interest of their counterfeiting scheme, keeping an abundant supply of shares in the marketplace also keeps the stock price low, the availability of additional borrows high, and the interest on the borrowed shares low. And if Citadel was worried about availability, they could also reborrow the share they just sold, i.e., borrow from A, sell to C, and then borrow the same share from C, a process known as rehypothecation, a legal practice. Citadel scheme part 5, but at what cost? The cost of resetting the FTD timetable, kicking it down the road, is twofold. First, there is a daily interest paid on every shorted share Citadel has. The interest rate is decided by the lending organization and is related to the price and availability of the shares to be borrowed. Second, for every short Citadel left open, the debt of that share remains on their books. As Citadel shorts more shares and as the price of the shares went up, their overall debt increases. If their debt gets too large, Citadel would potentially be margin called. Their debtors would force Citadel to pay up. It is unknown when or how large their debt must be before Citadel is margin called. Additionally, due to Citadel's activities, it is difficult to know what a legitimate short-term debt is on their books from their legitimate activities or what a fraudulent debt is from their counterfeiting activities. But by using a legitimate function to hide their scheme, they can achieve the legal results, selling shares which they don't have and never intend to deliver. Citadel's activities also pose an extreme cost to the system. Fraudulent shares circulating in the marketplace means investors may become unsure that their shares are legitimate, or investors may become unsure that the price of the stock is a reflection of legitimate supply and demand, but it is instead artificial, lowered because of the surplus of fake shares. TLDR, in summary, Citadel has been perpetrating a crime, illegally counterfeiting shares into the marketplace in order to profit. They are selling shares they don't have and never intended to deliver. Citadel has been using their designation as a market maker to cover their activities as well as continue to counterfeit market shares. This poses an increasing risk to their own business and more so to the overall market. Final note, here is an excerpt from Bernie Madoff from the Madoff Investment Scandal Wiki. At one point, Madoff Securities was the largest buying and selling market maker on the NASDAQ in 1992. The Wall Street Journal described him, one of the masters of the off-exchange third market and the bane of the New York Stock Exchange. He has built a highly profitable securities firm, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities, which siphons a huge volume of stock trades away from the big board. The $740 million average daily volume of trades executed electronically by the Madoff firm off the exchange equals 9% of the New York exchanges. 9% of the New York exchanges. Mr. Madoff's firm can execute trades so quickly and cheaply that it actually pays other brokerage firms a penny a share to execute their customers' orders. And here's an excerpt from Citadel's wiki. Citadel Securities automation has resulted in more reliable trading at lower costs and with tighter spreads. Citadel Securities is the largest market maker in options in the U.S., executing about 25% of U.S. listed equity options volume. According to the Wall Street Journal, about 1/3 of stock orders from the individual investors is completed through Citadel, which accounts for about 10% of the firm's revenue. Citadel Securities also executes about 13% of U.S. consolidated volume in equities and 28% of U.S. retail equities volume. All right, guys, so that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed. This is a really detailed article. Again, he did say this is all hypothesis, so it's not proven, but again, the pieces are getting added up, guys, and this is looking more increasingly like this is actually the case and what's going on. So again, I will be putting more of these videos out, especially this upcoming weekend. I'm going to try to get like maybe 10 videos out for you guys. I am doing this non-for-profit, but any likes, comments, or any requests for any content is definitely welcome. I just want to help my fellow apes, and I'll see you guys on the moon. Thanks again.